Today we're going to talk about how to maintain academic integrity with your students when they are working remotely. We know that when we give assessments or we want to see our students' progress, we usually have that control in our classrooms. But how do we try to maintain that while we're working remotely? So I just want to share 3 helpful tools with you that can help you do that. The first one is originality reports. That is a new feature found in Google Classroom. The second is using that version history tool that is already found in Google Docs. And the third is a Google add-on called Draftback. Okay, so here's an example of an assignment that I gave remotely that I wanted students to do on their own. I had a few students who were absent, getting closer to our coronavirus leave of absence, and then I had some students who didn't do so great on that test we took just before we left and needed another shot. So here's an example of a makeup exam that I gave over a large unit. I did it in Google Docs. The first thing I did was I wanted to make sure my students' answers went in a specific place so that they weren't editing my document, because this is going to be assigned as each student gets their own copy that is editable. And I want to make sure that they type their answers in a specific place. So all I would do is I would insert a 1 square table. So if you're not sure what that looks like, I'm just going to go ahead and insert another one here. I'm just going to bring my toolbar back. I'm going to go to Insert, Table, 1 by 1 square. And so now there's a place for my students to insert their work. What I would do is I would finish out my test, and then I would get ready to assign it. And I would try to make sure my questions weren't quote unquote Googleable, that there are things that they had to come up and I gave specific examples and specific stories, and they had to pull examples from that story. And it's something they couldn't just Google, but you'd be surprised what your students tried to Google. So when you're assigning this in Google Classroom, so let's pretend I'm going to go assign this in my Google Classroom. I'm going to go to Classwork, create my assignment, just like I would title it, add any instructions. Then I would pull in that assignment from Drive. I'm going to pull in my assignment. Make sure you check that box, super duper important. Instead of students can view, you want to make a copy for each student. You want to be able to go into that student's copy at any time and check on their progress. So that is very important that you make a copy for each student. Even if you're given an essay and you want them to create something from scratch, give them that blank Google Doc and click make a copy for each student, because it gives you the rights to view. The most important thing you need to do when you're over here on this right-hand side is down here where it says originality reports. This right here is super duper cool. It's a new tool. You get 3 assignments per class. So that means for this 2nd hour class, throughout the time that this 2nd hour class exists, I can assign 3 different things to have their originality checked, and I can check the originality for the entire class. So what you will do is you will check that box, and it's going to remind you, hey, you can only enable so many per class. I've already used 1, you have 2 left. So you'll click that box and click continue. So you will click continue, and what it will do is when students are finished with their work, it will allow you to run a report, and I will show you what that looks like in a few moments. So that's kind of how you get started with making the doc, then checking the originality reports. And so now let's go back and see some more of those tools on finished work. Okay, so now let's pretend that you've given the assignment, you're running the originality report, and we're going to see what this looks like on the back end. So I'm covering up my student's name for their privacy, but I do want to point out to you what this is going to look like when you go to grade the assignment. So you go into Google Classroom and you open up the student's assignment. You're going to see their work over here in the window on the left, but on the right, if you've check originality, you're going to see this place where you can click check originality. So when you click check originality, it's going to run that originality report to make sure the student's work is their own. And you might get a couple of messages back in return. Here's an example of a student who I checked the originality. After I clicked check originality, it showed me there was no flagged passages. So that means according to the originality report, it didn't see anything odd. It didn't pick up anything, any plagiarism for this student's work. However, for this particular student, it says one flagged passage. So all I need to do as the teacher is click where it says one flagged passage. And what I will do is it will tell me where it believes that paragraph came from. And I can scroll down to the place within that person's work and I can see where they thought it came from. So it will show me what the student said and what it says on the web. So what I did is I looked at what the student wrote and then I looked at what was the web match and I saw personally it seemed close-ish, but not that close. I don't think it was exactly copied. And I have a way where I can see if it was exactly copied. I can look back and see if the student copied and pasted by doing one more thing. But that's how originality report can just give you a quick glance of was anything copied or pasted or not. Okay, so back inside the document, what if I found a flagged passage and now I'm kind of curious? So a way I can go back and dig even deeper is I'm going to click where it says open in new window. I'm going to open the student's work in a new window and I'm going to use that version history trick. So I'm going to go into File, Version History, See Version History. On the right-hand side, I'm going to see what day and time the student most recently worked on this project. So I'm going to click on it. And I can see every edit made in time. So the item that was moved or the item that was typed is going to be highlighted at each moment in time. So I can scroll through and see all of the edits the student made and at what time. Now, for when you are talking about being diligent in making sure a student finishes something in the right amount of time, I can see that I assign this to this student at exactly this day and time, April 17th, 6:02. However, this student may open it up on April 21st and worked on it from 1:35 all the way until 3:07. So if I think that's enough time for that student, too much or too little, I can look over those timestamps and I can see what was edited at exactly one time. Another big benefit of this is that if I see all of a sudden there's a huge block of text that was added in a very short period of time, it was very likely cut and paste. And so you can find out where it was cut and paste from. And there's even one more tool to help you browse through that as well. So let me show you that tool. The very last tool I want to show you is something called Draft Back. Draft Back is a tool that allows you to see all of the edits in kind of a time-lapse format where you can see how many edits that student made in that amount of time. So I'm going to go into my Draft Back tool. So right here where it says Draft Back, it shows how many revisions that student made. So this is a Google add-on. I click View, and now what it does is it shows me what this student wrote. I can see it. I can see that that student is actually typing. I'm seeing each letter pop up one at a time. If a student copied and pasted something from another source, all of a sudden you would see a huge paragraph pop up in the same second. So now I can see the student is going back and cutting and revising and changing and rewording their answers. So I wanted to show you real quickly an example of when I actually did catch a student being untruthful on an assessment. So when looking at draft back, I got a flagged passage picked up on the student's paper. Then I looked at draft back and saw where a large chunk of information was just pasted. And then what I did was I went into that version history and I screenshot what the student had. So I could see all of a sudden there was this weird change in font. There was the weird boldness, and all of the stuff in purple was put in at once. And so I could tell, like, that's totally a place where they must have copied and pasted from the internet, because those must have been the keywords that were being searched. And then the whole flagged passage, they even pulled up for me where that passage came from. And so I highlighted the text in the passage that was clearly copied and pasted into that student's test. And I let them know that, like, hey, I found this. It's pretty obvious you cut and pasted, and now you're not getting any credit. And so I want to show you that it takes a few steps. There's several tools you can use. I use some of them alone or in combination, but when you suspect a student has been cheating, or you think they took too long a test, or you can even use that version history to see, did they open it 3 or 4 times, and an assessment they should have taken all in one sitting, did they open it in over the series of 3 days? You can check using Google Docs and running it through these different tools. Hopefully that helped. Just to recap one more time, Google Docs, originality reports if it's enabled on your in your Google Classroom. There's also that version history, and then you can also use draft back to kind of do a time lapse of all of that.